to the Bayview Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bayview Podcast. My name is Andrew. I am one of your hosts, joined as always by Chris Emery. How are you, sir?
Doing wonderful. Good to be here, back in the studio, just hanging out, chatting, man.
Buddy.
Just kind of like what our intro says. It's kind of like a dialogue. We have that convo with people a lot when they're guests, right? Like they're like, okay, so what are we gonna do? We're like, we're gonna talk,
see what happens.
Yeah, see where it goes.
It's the beauty of story and sharing and conversation.
Yeah,
I think it's going to
so.
lead you all different ways. And usually, I mean, we've seen it. Hopefully, that you as the listeners experience that of like, this has been really beneficial. Whether it's just us talking about Revelation or one of our series, or again hearing just people's stories.
Yeah,
hopefully it's been encouraging, and you know, our goal is to always points back to Jesus and what He's done in our lives and the impact. And so,
100%.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's good.
So, yeah, and I am. I mean, I love when we have guests. I love the different series we do, but I'm loving this. Like I'm totally digging this deep dive into Revelation that we've been in for several weeks now. Even though I know on a Sunday, in that 35 minutes we have, obviously there's only so deep you can go, so far you can go, but to be able to follow up with our Bible studies all in the same book, and then even here on the podcast. Yep.
I was sharing with someone who attends a different church. It's we're kind of doing like that 30,000 foot flyover is basically what we're doing with the book, and we could spend weeks and weeks and weeks and months on Revelation.
Oh, yeah.
And honestly, there's probably so much that we wouldn't even get to doing that. And so,
totally.
Highly encouraged. Hopefully, when we're all done with this, you'll go back and reread the book itself. I think this past Sunday, which we'll talk about here in a moment, like you encouraged like Daniel 7 and on, and Ezekiel and Isaiah and all these other books of the Bible that speak to what's been talked about or what's happening in this book. And man, I'm hoping people see this as like Revelation is a really cool, ends up being like I think a really cool period on the Bible.
Yeah.
Like the
totally
actual
agree,
like here it is.
Yeah.
And a good reminder of just like, again, we say it every week that God's got it.
Right.
Like the victory's His. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be scared. We don't have to be scared of this even. And so,
well, and I think that's a good phrase, and that's kind of our heart behind this, because obviously this is not an end-all study of the book of Revelation, meaning you'll never have to go study it again. We're going nowhere near that level of depth. But I hope, and our heart behind it is that it does take some of the fear and trepidation out of it. That it is like, oh, it's been so unapproachable. Now it feels approachable. I can read it, and I can be like, oh, okay, so that's okay. I remember that being said. Now I understand. And there's clearly plenty of mystery that we'll just never understand. But it doesn't mean we through that mystery we don't lose the message.
Yeah, that's good.
I think so many people have never heard the message of it because they're afraid of the mystery of it.
Yeah.
And there's so much good stuff in here.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm enjoying it. I know you're enjoying it. I mean, our conversations, our studies, we've been talking about this book for months, a lot longer than before we started preaching it. I've loved that.
Yeah. It's so cool. It was, I've appreciated just like, you said the study part, like that's been huge. I mean, some of the support we've received from other pastors or professors and just looking through thoughts of people much more intelligent than me even, and just the breakdown of it, and to see like, okay, like this is a book that is still like good for today. Like it still has meaning for today.
Absolutely.
We've used the phrase often, for us, not to us. And it's been a good reminder of like, this was still a letter. Like there was people who read this and understood it. Yeah. And like they saw the imagery for what it is, and it was impacting for them. And so, but it's cool 2,000 years later to sit down and be like, okay, how does this change our life as well? And this means something on a Monday now, just as much as it did on a Monday then. So
that's
good.
A great way to say it. I agree.
That's good.
So what I want to do this week is this week and this coming week, you're preaching this coming Sunday here at Bayview Church. If you're in the area, we'd love to see you. They kind of overlap quite a bit, and so what we did this last week, more or less, was we introduced the main characters in these final stories and really what the agenda is.
Yeah.
So we didn't go any further than that. Like the battles are still coming. Armageddon is still coming. But what we have happening is, the big picture. Chapter 12 becomes like this just overview of the eternal battle between good and evil.
Yeah.
So it's like John pauses the timeline and he says, hey, let's remember. He talks about a pregnant woman giving birth and the dragon trying to kill the baby. And so we have obviously what this is the birth of Jesus Christ. The woman can be interpreted as Israel or maybe the church or God's people. However, either one probably is right. And then the dragon is Satan.
Yeah. And
Satan is out to destroy God's plan of redemption.
Yeah.
That's the battle here.
Yeah.
Satan's already succeeded in bringing about a fallen world. Now he needs to secure his victory.
Yeah. And
the only way to do that is to stop Jesus.
Yeah.
So that's what chapter 12 is, but it does introduce us to it. So what we want to do just briefly today is kind of review who were the main characters that we see in these 3 chapters of 12, 13, and 14, and what's the agenda.
Yeah.
So chapter 12, the dragon. That is Satan. He is described as a large red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, with 7 crowns on his head. His tail swept away 1/3 of the stars in the sky, and he threw them to earth. So we are not saying Satan is a dragon with all these heads.
Yeah.
That's not how this reads. This is, again, symbolic imagery.
Yep.
But he does come, and he does have a plan. He has an agenda, and I think what we see is the beauty of backing out and looking at the larger picture, we see the overall agenda.
Yeah.
So then we have 2 more characters introduced in the next chapter. We have the beast out of the sea, beast number 1, and we're told that he has 7 heads and 10 horns, with 10 crowns on its horns, and written on each head were the names of that blasphemed God. So he looked like a leopard. He had the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion. What's happening here is a description similar to Daniel 7.
Yep. Yeah, Daniel 7 kind of, I think, shares there's multiple beasts. That like there's 4 beasts that appear, and this is almost like if those 4 beasts were put together.
Right.
Like, right. For the Power Ranger fans, if you're ever allowed to watch Power Rangers, it's like the Megazord. Like all the everything's come together to make this giant.
Or wait, what was the other? Voltron?
Yeah, Voltron.
The individual, they come together, form the
one
one.
More flashback even. Yeah, so it's just like there's a lot of similarity between the Daniel 7 beasts and this one, which I think you mentioned Sunday, and I think we'll keep repeating. Like, there's a lot of other books that really go really well with Revelation. There's nothing new in Revelation that hasn't been spoken to,
correct,
or spoken about before.
Yeah, and typically Daniel and Ezekiel are the 2 most cohesive books that kind of reference so many of these things. So we have this beast. He comes out. This is the Antichrist. This is the individual that will lead. Now, it talks about the 10 crowns. And so it seems that he'll lead a coalition of empires. Like he'll lead a group. And so, again, now we're seeing it's not a dragon coming out of the sea. It's a leader that will lead a union of nations that will bring peace to the world for 3.5 years.
Yeah.
And so that's we're starting to see, again, even we saw this back with the trumpets and the seals. Oh, these are real world events that I can see how this cascades and happens.
Yeah.
So we have this, and then we are introduced to the 3rd character, and this is in verse 11 of chapter 13. Another beast came up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like those of a lamb, but he spoke with the voice of a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast, and he required all the earth and its people to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. All of these details are so important. This beast, number 2, is commonly referred to as the false prophet.
Yep.
And he comes and he works as more of a spiritual realm type person.
He finalizes the satanic trinity.
He does.
Basically.
And that's exactly what this is. This is a counterfeit trinity, right? This is a version of truth that is a lie, which is how this whole thing started. We talked about that a little bit Sunday. Yep. Satan did not bold-faced lie to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
It wasn't all lie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, fair bit of truth in what he said.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, it's, and I think that's the deceiver part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I think often it's like playing the telephone game of like, if it's said enough times, does that become what was said?
Yeah.
Well, half of us believe it because we've heard it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not what originally was said, right? So like, there's this reality of like, things can be misconstrued or not the right emphasis, or let's say, so it's like, it doesn't take a bold face opposite lie to be deceived of the actual truth.
Well, we'd probably see that coming.
Yeah.
Like we would know that one.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, in the Garden of Eden, he says, listen, if you eat this fruit that God said don't, well, he doesn't want you to, because now he said it'll make you like a God.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, the play on words is it'll make you more like God in that you'll see the difference between good and evil.
Yeah.
Now, he held back all of the consequences of that choice.
Sure. Yeah.
You'll now die. You'll bring a curse on the earth and on all mankind. Like, there's some other downsides. Let's forget that.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for us to know that for a counterfeit to work, it's got to look real.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to be fooled by Monopoly money $20 bill.
Yeah.
It's pink.
Yeah. It's I look at it like, I'm going to totally jack this up, but like fake purses is huge.
Yes,
like
you're right.
Like a Prada or a Dolce
Louis,
Gabbana.
a fake Louis.
And all it is everything looks real, and sometimes even the leather is real, but the emblem is backwards.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you don't have the eye and you think it is what it is, it would pass.
Yep.
And
the key is, and that I'm so glad that's such a better example than just money, because we're probably all more susceptible to getting sucked into buying false Prada or fake Oakleys or a knockoff time or a Rolex or something like that. You don't recognize the fakes by looking at other fakes. You recognize the fakes because you know what the real is.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I watch videos of like the sneakerheads, the guy who are buying and selling shoes. And some of it I think is for show, but a lot of times a guy who spends a lot of time around the Nikes or those shoes, they can tell a fake from a real. They'll say, yeah, this tag, if you look close enough, it's actually faded. Why? Because I have a real one right here, and look, it's a different white. Like it's just the simplest things to where the person who bought it was like, yeah, I spent $300 on this, and I would have told you and worn it to the day I died that it was real. Yep. So
I mean, it seems like we're reading this like, oh, beasts and dragons. I mean, maybe for a lot of Christians looking at it, be like, well, I'm not going to get sucked into following a dragon. Yeah, that's what we're saying. It's not a dragon. Yeah, it's going to sound almost right.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit of this on this upcoming message. I've been really convicted of like, no one wakes up and says, let me ruin my life today.
Ooh, yeah, good.
Right? I'm going to wake up and I'm going to cheat on my wife today. I'm going to end my marriage. Like, more times than not, we don't wake up and do that. But it's the little things. It's the little moments where it's like, we haven't been staring at the real thing. We've allowed the false to speak more truth, or we're spending more time around the false to like, and it's just the little step by step where I don't naturally drift towards good. My flesh will naturally drift towards evil. And I think that's what we're seeing. It's like, it doesn't take a lot to assume I have the real thing or what I think I want or need. Yeah.
And I think that's what scares me the most, maybe about a lot of the people, maybe in our church or in the church in general, the people we lead, is that I'm not sure they're familiar enough with the real to be able to spot the fake.
Sure.
Like, honestly, you could sell me a fake Louis Vuitton purse in a heartbeat. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know because I don't even know what the real thing looks like. Like, okay, they're brown and they're rather ugly.
Yeah.
That's all I got, right?
Yeah.
But when you talk to somebody, and it's the same thing with a sneakerhead or a watch expert or something like that, they instantly be like, oh, yeah, well, see, this clasp right here, it shouldn't look that way because on the real ones, it's this.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to understand is, as this book is written to us in the now, is that what we do now is probably spend less time watching for the dragon and more time learning the real.
Yeah, that's good.
Learning the truth, right? Like I need to know the Word of God so well that when someone preaches something a little bit off, I hear it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So just last week, actually, I get this random phone call from my daughter and her fiance, and there's this church they'd been kind of checking out a little bit. They live down in Indiana, and the first couple of Sundays it felt right, and so they call me and they're like, "Hey, we just sent you a link to the message for today. Can you tell us what we think? What you think? We don't think it sounded right." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll check it out." I pulled up within probably the first 10 minutes of this message. I'm like, "Oh, this is blatant prosperity gospel.
Wow.
This is straight up, health and wealth, prosperity. This is false teaching right out of the gate." And the more I listened to it, the worse it got. I'm like, "Oh yeah, this is terrible." So I called them right back, and I'm, after I finished listening to it, and I'm like, "Well done.
Yeah.
I am so proud of the two of you."
Yeah.
That so quickly you were like, and they were like, "Yeah, like within the first 5 minutes, we're looking at each other like, this isn't biblical."
Wow.
And I'm like, "You killed it," because the room was full of people that did not hear it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the message. We have this unholy trinity, the satanic trinity of Satan, the Antichrist, the false prophet. They're going to come and they're going to sell a message. They're going to sell a vision. They're going to sell a future that sounds good. It tastes good. It looks right.
Yeah.
That's going to be the deceiving part. But it is going to lead to a choice. It is going to a moment. And I think that's where we have to also understand, and we see that here when it comes to what everyone knows, and that is in verse 16 of chapter 13. He required everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on the right hand or on the forehead. And no one could buy or sell anything without that mark, which was either the name of the beast or the number representing his name. Wisdom is needed here. Let the one with understanding solve the meaning of the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Yeah. So, I mean, ever since I was a kid, the number 666, I knew that was a bad number, right? That was Satan's number. You watch horror movies or evil horror movies, 666 is out there somewhere.
Yep.
I don't know. We all know.
Yep.
I've also heard of the fear of the mark of the beast for a long time among Christians and churches, and like, oh. What's so interesting is the misunderstanding. I love that it says, "Hey, use some wisdom here." I talked a little about this on Sunday. There was a season, I was talking to some older people, older generation than I am. They were talking about back when credit cards and debit cards came out. There was actually a genuine concern among some Christians, not massive movement, but like, oh, we shouldn't use these credit cards because that means that everywhere we go, we're required to use them, and it's tracking us, it's marking our purchases. This could be the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
So there are people that didn't.
Yep.
There was that same conversation about cell phones.
Yep. And
smartphones and apps, and I remember hearing some of that because I was alive for that. When I don't know, like everything in there now, like, that could be how they get us.
Yep.
And then probably more recently, I'm going to say the word nonsense. And if you had this thought, I'm not trying to insult you. I'm just saying we look back now, it's nonsense. People are like, "Oh, what if the vaccine has the mark of the beast in it?" You remember hearing that?
Yep.
That is not how this happens. Yep. All right. Let me reiterate what I said Sunday in case you didn't listen to it. Nobody will be found guilty of accidentally taking the mark of the beast.
Yeah, that's good. That's true.
Nobody's going to actually be like, "Well, it wasn't the vaccine. Who knew? Wow, that stinks. Sorry about that." Or it was an app on your phone. Or, wow, yeah, it was that thing. It was that.
It's probably the Nike Run Club. Probably something like that.
Yeah, it's in your Fitbit, right? Or something like that. It's just not that. It's a choice that you will come to make, and it will be a conscious choice between these two versions of truth. One is real truth, one counterfeit.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we have to understand. That's what this is all about. There will be people that have the seal of God on their forehead, and then in the counterfeit version, that's the mark of the beast.
Yeah, it's you use the word counterfeit, which is so accurate. It's meant to mimic, right? It's meant to mimic. Even it was a Jewish practice to write scripture on your hand or your forehead. That was a prayer,
correct?
And it was also meant to parody or mimic the sealing of the servants,
correct?
Right? So Satan is sealing his own servants. Well, yes, I can be marked as a servant, whether I want to or not, but either way, I'm still working for that person. Like I am in their servitude, which means I'm there.
Yep.
And
yeah, that's a great point because
Yeah.
biblical times, markings on your face, forehead, I mean, that was used.
Yeah.
Slaves were marked that way as a sign of ownership. There was a group of Christians under a certain, I can't remember, I'd have to go back to my notes, but they were so tired of watching Christians being marked in a negative way, they chose to go ahead and mark themselves to identify themselves as slaves to Christ. So, yeah, I mean, so again, we've said this before, the people reading this are like, oh, well, yeah, a mark on your forehead, that makes sense, or on your hand, we see that.
Yeah, it's usually an ideology. If it's on your forehead, it's this is what I'm about. I'm thinking on this, and if it's on your hands, it's an action. I am doing this.
So good.
And so it's like that. Either way, it is saying I'm about this.
Yep.
And so again, I don't think someone's going to stumble into the mark. There's a genuine choice to receive.
It's not like waking up after a
Yeah.
bad decision night, and you have a tattoo on your face.
Yeah.
Right? Like this didn't start with Mike Tyson or Post
we're not getting
Malone.
Mike
Like this
Tyson
goes way on
down
back.
this,
It goes way before all that.
Yeah.
You know, or Jelly Roll. Sorry, Jelly Roll, you did not start this. How many of our listeners are like, we have no idea who they're talking about other than Tyson? So yeah, I think that's important for us to recognize. This is a choice. It's coming down to our allegiance. And biblically, when you bowed before a king or you bowed before a ruler, that was a form of showing your allegiance, but it's also a form of worship. And that's what Satan's after. He wants our worship. He wants our allegiance. And there will become a moment of choice. Yeah. And there will be a time, and we see this already happening, it will be a life and death choice. Yeah. It really will. But not right now. And yet I still think we already see people who have questionable allegiance. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Yeah, especially because the mark kind of represents the final straw. Like it's like it is truly saying, this is what I'm about. Yeah. And to not receive the mark is your declaration to God.
Yep.
And in that day, when that day comes, you're not going to be able to sit on the sidelines.
No, it's one or the other.
And still wait. Like you're going to be in one or two camps. And I think that's what I think there's some of us who are sitting on the sidelines waiting. And even though we kind of know which way we'd go, it is still, there's that sense of like, I'd like to just sit it out if I could. Yeah. And I think if anything, we're just reminded of like, in the end, you're not going to have a choice. Yeah.
Well, even now, not choosing is choosing.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm not choosing God, I'm choosing not God.
Yeah.
And I think I think you're spot on. It's where so many people are misunderstanding. Like wishy-washy. I mean, we've already talked about that early on. Like, very quickly, he's like, and keep in mind, all this is being written to the 7 churches that received these letters. Yeah. And he called them out on a lot of stuff. And he's saying, because of these things, let me tell you why these are so important for you to fix. Yeah. One of them being lukewarm. Yeah. The wishy-washiness will have no place in the final stories because you will be forced to choose. And even if you're like, well, I don't want that seal of God, okay, the only other option is the mark of the beast. Yeah. The seal of God is on the forehead of those who call out to God. And so now you're in this place where like, well, all right, well, what are you taking? And not choosing God is choosing not God. Yeah. And Satan, as the counterfeit Christ, the counterfeit God, that's another way you can say it. Satan is the not God of this story. And yet so many people now are like, well, I choose God for my eternity. I want to choose God for my forgiveness, but I don't want to choose God for my fulfillment. And I don't want to choose God for my relationships, my source of love. Yeah. I don't want to choose God for my security. I don't want to choose God for my pleasure. I don't want to choose God for these things. Yeah. Right now, volatile time in our country, as the day we're recording this, as of today, right now, it's election day. It's a day where today will mark a huge polarization of our society as it has in the past. I don't want to say it's going to be history altering. I don't know. I mean, we've been down this road before. There are going to be people that when the election results begin to pour in, we begin to at least get a glimpse of the results. I don't know if that'll be tomorrow or not. Yep. That there will be people who are Christians who, if it does not go the way they feel it should to honor biblical principles, which is how I voted. I voted not on a candidate, but which candidate comes closest to upholding biblical things. They're going to lose their minds. They're going to lose. They're going to be full of fear and panic and angst and anger. They're going to be questioning everything. They're going to worry about our future. They're going to not sleep. They're not going to eat. I mean, I don't think I'm being over exaggerating. There are people it's going to affect them at that level.
Yeah, that's true.
Not saying that it doesn't mean hard things are not coming.
Yeah.
But it's not what we're reading here.
Yeah.
And what I said Sunday, I'll say it again. I believe there are followers, there are people who call themselves Christians who they think they have enough faith for the tribulation, but they lack enough faith for an election.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're ready to go wall to wall, toe to toe with the dragon and the beasts, but an election rattles the foundation of your faith.
Yeah.
That means my allegiance is off.
Yeah. And I think we'll talk about that this next week of like that, the even taking your focus and your affection off of God and putting on a government or some sort of state structure as what's going to bring ultimate peace. Again, it's still missing the mark. It's still missing the idea of what's really being said here of like, what is your focus? Like, what is your attention? So again, we don't need to necessarily not be preparing for what could. But our preparation needs to be more of what it's going to be like when God wins.
Yeah. I think that's where we look at it. And all right, God, tough days, tough times. Let's run after you harder, and let's see how your faithfulness endures these days. Let's say everything goes the opposite way of how the Christian community feels like it should today.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how do we double down now, and how do we make sure we point all of this to Jesus? How do we demonstrate the love of Jesus in a polarized, conflict-filled society? How do we fight for what is godly and biblical in a culture they departed from that a long time ago?
Yeah,
you don't need a president in office to change that. It's happened.
Yeah.
It's happening. So what are we going to do? How are we going to thrive in these moments? How are we going to see the opportunities?
Yeah.
And I think it's a shift. It's such a change. It's funny because it makes me think quickly of something we talk about here at staff, that being in ministry, there's just times where obviously there's times that are difficult. Being in ministry is not always easy.
Yeah.
Maybe you think that working at church means that we all get together and we hold hands and we sing songs all day and then we hug it out and we go home.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah,
so
wouldn't
fun.
that be great?
Yeah.
Potlucks every day,
Yeah.
deviled eggs, whatever. No, there's times where it's hard. So something we say here is, hey, let's never lose the get to mentality. And it's not that we have to do these things. We get to do these things. And the shift in those words changes your perspective and your heart as you go into even things that sometimes are challenging.
That's true.
And I think, what if the church looks like, wow, unfortunately, we have to live through this season. We have to live through this time. What if we look at it in that same perspective? Like, wow, we get to.
Yeah.
We get to represent the Lord God Almighty in these horrible times, in these difficult situations. We get to. I had an older gentleman say that to me at the last election 4 years ago. And he's like, I hope the tribulation happens while I'm alive. I'm like, really? He goes, man, wouldn't it be cool to get to represent Jesus in the tribulation? I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the stinging locusts that have lady hair and teeth. Like, I don't think I want to see that.
Yeah.
And here's this old saint that's like, no, how cool would that be?
That's so cool.
And I think that's how we go into this, right? Like, man, all right, my allegiance is to the Lord God Almighty, who's still on the throne.
Yep.
And he's watched every election from the throne. He's watched every kingdom fall, every empire rise from the throne. He's watched the infancy of the United States. We're 250 years old.
Yeah.
In the historical books, that's a baby nation.
Yep.
We're not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Love our country. Not saying that. Love it. I'm just saying, like, God's still there. He's watched every election. And guess what? Tomorrow, he'll still be right there. And,
Yeah, there's a lot of peace in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of peace.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm excited for where this goes. In the coming couple weeks, we're going to be talking about the fall of Babylon, the fall of earth. Like you'll be tackling that, the fall of all things that we see here. And then we'll talk about the fall of evil. Armageddon's coming. This is coming to a head.
Yeah.
And the victory story is the last week. That's gonna be great though, but we already know how it goes.
Yeah.
So there's no spoiler alert.
Yeah, I think we spoiled it every week at this point. So
I mean, God kind of spoiled it when He gave us His word.
Exactly.
Whatever. So, hey, yeah. So yeah, come back next week. We're gonna keep kind of firing down this path, and yeah, it's just been awesome. Hopefully, you've been able to read through the book yourself. Just keep digging in, and we're gonna keep digging in with you.
Yeah.
So
Good
cool.
stuff.
Awesome. Hey, if you haven't done so, click subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. That way you never miss an episode. We are here each and every week. Look forward to this time of just having some dialogue and breaking it down.
Yeah.
Yep. Sweet. All right. Hey, for today, it's Andrew. It's Chris. We are out of here, and we will see you next time around.